You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you may not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with discounts that are easy to come by. In fact, 99% of their auto customers earn at least one discount. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
Did you know Fast Growing Trees is America's largest and most trusted online nursery with thousands of trees and plants and over 2 million happy customers? Whether you're planting fruit trees, adding privacy, brightening things up with flowers, or bringing in houseplants, Fast Growing Trees has it all. Even better, they can help you find options that are right for your climate, your space, and lifestyle. Click Order Grow. Every plant arrives healthy with the Alive and Thrive guarantee straight to your door. So if you're ready to get planting, this is the moment. Right now, they have great deals on spring planting essentials, up to half off on select plants. And listeners to our show get 20% off their first purchase when using the code WWO at checkout. That's an additional 20% off. Better plants and better growing at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code WWO at checkout. Fastgrowingtrees.com, code WWO. Now's the perfect time to plant. Let's grow together. Use WWO to save today. Offer is valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions apply. Go to growingfasttrees.com for details.
Welcome to Orioles and the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan. Our co-host Nick Stevens is out this week. He will be back next week, but in the meantime, Bob and I are going to take questions from our listeners as part of our April mailbag, and as usual, some really good questions came in through the Mailbag channel on our Discord and cover all sorts of things Orioles related, including majors and minors. And if you're watching this show live, either on YouTube or Facebook, feel free to drop a comment on there and we may read the question on air. And I'm going to start off right away with this question from Vivek, which is, who are the top 3 Oriole prospects deserving of a promotion of level early in this season? And Bob, I think we threw some names out there in our last episode, but now we got a chance to really dive in on this topic.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because we know what'll happen. We know there will be some quick triggers. I think we talked about previously earlier this week JT Quinn and Joseph Jirwa, and we'll talk about them again on this episode. But I do think they'll be pretty quick. I don't think they'll be promoted before the month is over, so I'm going to just bypass them for now. We did talk about Braden Sloan. I got to imagine he's going to get the bump up to high A. And I think relief pitcher, honestly, is where you're going to see it. Like, we've already seen Alex Pham broke camp with Double A. I don't even think he pitched for them. Got the call up to Triple A, where he's appeared in 4 games now. Tyson Neighbors, another option, a guy that we thought could have started at AAA to begin the year just because he's got really nasty stuff. He's pitched in 3 games. First game didn't go great, but he struck out the side in a perfect inning on Sunday. He's got 8 strikeouts in 3 innings. I think he's a guy, if there's injuries at AAA or Orioles need to pull some guys up to help the Major League team, you could see him get the promotion to AAA. I'll try to give one hitter just to, let's see, if there's anybody that maybe they should have started a level above, but because of room, they didn't quite get there. Cobb Hightower. I'll say he could be a guy because he's batting like 400, something like that. 400 and something, like 458 before this week's slate of games, and I think he was 2 for 4 tonight as well with a walk. He was a guy that arguably could have started at Frederick, but you got Wahiva Aloy there. Maybe they get him the bump up because DJ Layton's off to a great start. And maybe you want to get him more time at shortstop. You can use Hightower at second base a little more often, at third base with Frederick. I don't know. But those will be my 3 picks. I'll say Tyson Neighbors, Braden Sloan, and Cobb Hightower.
Yeah, Hightower was a guy that I had looked at as well because he is off to such a good start this year. And I agree. It was probably borderline if you look at his season last year that he could have gone to high A and you could have made an aggressive push to put him up there. But I understand why the Orioles started him at Delmarva. They knew they were going to have Aloy at Frederick to begin this year, and I know that they want to get him reps at shortstop. What I would wonder is, will they wait until Aloy is promoted to Chesapeake? Because I feel pretty confidently that as long as Aloy stays healthy, he's going to get Double A time this year. Are they going to wait to promote Hightower until Eloy goes up? Or could they promote Hightower sooner and just give him more starts at second base while they wait for Eloy to get to Double-A? I don't think either option is bad, but something to keep an eye on there. I agree with Tyson Neighbors. I think that that's a guy who, even though the first outing of the season wasn't great, you look at the fact that he's now logged in his career 39 and a third Double-A innings, including some time there last year. I agree. I thought that there was a possibility he was going to start this year at Norfolk. I think stuff-wise he's ready for that challenge at AAA, and I think Braden Sloan is in a very similar spot down in Delmarva. I just think he's going to overmatch low-A hitters until he gets that bump up. One other name I'll throw out there, Micah Assman. I could see Assman getting the call up. I was surprised when I looked that Neighbors actually has quite a few more Double-A innings than Assman does at this point, because Assman was barely in Double-A at the time that he was traded from the Tigers to the Orioles. But still, these are guys that have been in Double-A since the second half of last year. Assman had that little taste of higher competition with the World Baseball Classic, and the formula that he has where he just does such a good job of pounding the ball in the strike zone, keeping the ball on the ground, limiting hard contact, plays really well, especially from the left side. So that's a guy that, even if he doesn't necessarily throw a ton of innings over the first few weeks of the year, I could see being fast-tracked for promotion.
Yeah, he looks fantastic as well. Just looking at some of the hotter starters, I think Trace Bright could be an option, especially if they want to convert him full-time to relief. Maybe a Luis Beltran in low-A could get the bump up. And maybe one that might actually be my pick to be the next guy is Victor Figueroa, who really struggled after the trade with the Padres, the first baseman, big power-hitting guy. He didn't really do much after the trade, but already this year hit his fourth home run Tuesday night before the rain shortened that game, suspended that game until the next day, which, spoiler alert, that's the time we're recording this. So he's already got 4 home runs on the season early on. And look, Chesapeake could use all the help they can get on the offensive side, so could certainly see him be a guy that gets a quick trigger up a level.
Absolutely.
I'll go up to our... Oh, yep. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, go ahead and take our next question.
Good idea. Let's go with Bobby Jones. I said we were going to talk about these guys, and here we are. How many levels do JT Quinn and Joseph Giroux climb this year?
I'll go conservative for now and say 2, but I do think that there is a real possibility that Giroux could get to AAA, especially because he has more time as a starter so far in his career. So in theory, that gives him a little bit more run. We've seen him go pretty deep into the outing over his first 2 starts, which tells me the Orioles are willing to be aggressive with him, especially if he's working as efficiently as he is right now. The thing is, it's hard to forecast with pitchers because you know that you want to keep these guys starting. You know you want to get them to AAA at the point where there is an opening in the rotation. And we're hoping that this year goes a little bit differently. You don't have the turnover in the higher levels that you had last year. So that's one thing that gives me a little bit of pause. It has nothing to do with talent. But I certainly could see 2 levels for both guys. I think that as long as they're healthy, that's kind of a given. And 3 on a semi-aggressive timetable for Giroux and 3 on an aggressive timetable for Quinn.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense for me. I'll say Quinn stops at Double-A just because, as you said, he doesn't have that history of innings pitched. I'm sure they want to get him to maybe 80 innings this year, so I think if you cut off not giving him those extra week or 2 at AAA at the end of the season, which I think they could give Giroux just to give him those innings. That's fun. Yeah, I think Giroux will get up to AAA. Take it from here, Zach.
Yeah, I could see that happening. We'll go in now to our next question here, which comes from the Bird is the Word. What are our thoughts on the Orioles designating Chase McDermott for assignment? Now, this came last week when Adley Rutschman was placed on the IL. The Orioles selected Maverick Hanley, and then in a corresponding move, DFA'd McDermott. McDermott had been at AAA at the time that he was DFA'd. We saw him briefly in big league camp after a 2025 season. That was a bit of a roller coaster for reasons we've talked about before and that I'm sure we're going to get into a little bit here. But, Bob, what were your thoughts on the Orioles' decision to designate Chase McDermott for assignment?
Go sit with mommy. Okay. Sorry, guys. Talking about Chase McDermott, I was definitely surprised by the DFA, but he just can't control the ball, just like I can't control my kids. And, he's got that great stuff, the strikeout stuff, but the command just never got there. Hopefully he clears waivers and comes back into this system and they can continue to work with him. I know the organization still likes him and still believes in the stuff. It's just when you're a competing team, you have a deep farm system, just like Tampa Bay Rays in their prime. I would say they're a little bit past their prime, but in their prime, you're going to and just like with the Mets last year, we got Rico Garcia from the Mets because they knew he was a pretty good pitcher. They ran out of room. They needed to make moves, and somebody's got to go. So I think it was just one of those things where I think they hoped he would take the ball and run with it this spring training and improve that command, but it just hasn't happened yet. I do think he's a guy that, like with the Evan Phillips from the past, like a guy that they know has the ability to be a high-leverage reliever in the majors, but just right now, the timing, it's not working out. I could if someone claims him, I think they could have a chance to end up with a really solid reliever in the long term. But unfortunately for now, just didn't work out with the Orioles. And like I said, hopefully he clears waivers and can go back to AAA and continue to work on things.
Yeah, I'm hoping that's the case for the Orioles. With McDermott, I think that it's just, like you said, they're at a point where they're trying to make this team as competitive as possible. And I think one thing that we've seen this year, not just from the front office, but from Craig Albernaz as manager, is there's going to kind of a quick hook with players. They're not going to hesitate to shake things up if something isn't working. And in the case of McDermott, it may have just simply been that they didn't see him as an option in the big leagues anytime soon. I think he was also getting to a point, too, where he would have been out of options after this year, so you would have faced that possibility. But hopefully this is, I definitely know this is not the end of the road for him, but hopefully he gets an opportunity, whether it's in Baltimore or elsewhere, to show what he can do, because while spring training at the major league level didn't go well, we did see the fastball velocity tick up a little bit, and with the move to the bullpen full-time now, he could be helping a major league team in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to a question from KTGTV, also known as Matthew. How does Ryan Mountcastle's injury impact the Orioles? What a troll. What do you think, Zach?
Well, it takes an area where they have a lot of depth, probably too much depth, some people would argue, and now kind of puts that to the test, because not only do you have Ryan Mountcastle out, but you also have Tyler O'Neill out. Fortunately, you've got Pete Alonso there and his track record of durability, and the fact that he finally seems to be heating up at the plate. One thing that I think is interesting, we wanted to talk about this a little bit too, so glad that this question came in. The Orioles did go out and acquire Kristen Encarnacion Strand from the Cincinnati Reds as part of a move for cash considerations yesterday, or earlier this week on Monday. So they did get a little bit of depth in this area, and maybe he's a guy that gets a look in the majors at some point. But I think that the near-term consideration for the Orioles is that you're just happy you have Pete Alonso and Kobe Mayo in-house, and whatever you get from Ryan Mountcastle for the rest of this season, I don't think it's going to make or break this team.
This is a rare situation where the injury actually improves the team. No, I just think Weston Wilson got called up, added to the 40-man, and brought up to replace Mountcastle with this injury, and he honestly just fits this roster so much better than Mountcastle, who's basically the fourth first baseman, because you got Pete Alonso, Kobe Mayo can play there, Samuel Basayo can play there when he's not catching or DHing. Mountcastle was basically a glorified pinch hitter against left-handed pitching, and Weston Wilson can actually hit lefties really well, and more recently he's hit them better than Ryan Mountcastle has in the last couple of years. He can play all over the field, third base, second base, also first base, corner outfield. So, again, it's not to beat a dead horse with the Mountcastle thing. Shocked that they offered him arbitration. Shocked that they signed him with a mutual extension or mutual option year. Shocked that he didn't get traded in spring trading. But at the same time, who would want to trade for a guy that's making $7+ million when you could sign Rhys Hopkins for a minor league deal? Yeah, it's frustrating. Obviously, we're big fans of this front office and what they've been able to do and really work the fringes of a roster. This is one where I just don't understand the love for Mountcastle, but it is what it is. And, it looks like he'll be out for at least a couple months, added to the 60-man IL. But I do like the Christian Encarnacion Strand addition because he's got to go in the 40-man, but he does have 2 option years. And he's a guy that a year or two ago was one of the best prospects in baseball, at least top 50-ish for the Cincinnati Reds. First base, power hitter. If you can get him down to AAA and get him on that Ryan O'Hearn schedule where you're trying to fine-tune things down there, yeah, I mean, this is the year of getting former top prospects into the system with Big Christmas, Jahangston Noel, the guy that we claimed from the Giants, and then he ended up getting claimed by the Yankees. His name slipped in my mind at the top of my head, but he was a top prospect at one point in time. Now, Encarnacion Strand. So, yeah, get him in. See if you can work out the kinks because he's a guy kind of like Ryan Mountcastle, but a younger, stronger version where he's got the swing speed, he's got the exit velars, hits it on the ground a little bit too much. See what you can do. No harm, no foul. Maybe we end up DFAing him ourselves a little bit later this year, but I like the gamble.
Yeah, and broadly speaking, there are a lot of players like Encarnacion Strand in the minors. They have a lot of success against high minors pitching, AA and AAA, but then for whatever reason, it just never clicks in the major leagues. And maybe Encarnacion Strand is going to be one of those guys, but to take a flyer on him, I have no problem with that at all, and especially because, let's face it, Norfolk's lineup doesn't have a lot that's going to scare opposing pitchers, so if you could at least add a guy in there to hit around some of the players who you have down there now that can give you some power, that's not a bad thing. And if you're able to unlock something that gets a taste of the majors later this year, that could work out really well. And to your point, the Weston Wilson angle, I completely agree with you. I think that he's a much better fit for the roster because of his versatility. He can move around a little bit. And one thing, just to build on the topic from our last episode, which was how the Orioles are going to manage their infield with Jackson Holliday out a little bit longer now. If, in the worst case scenario, Jeremiah Jackson just, with more reps, gets some weaknesses exposed on defense, or he just stops hitting, or Blaze Alexander doesn't really start hitting, you've got Weston Wilson now that you can bring up. And you can put him in the infield, you can put him in the outfield. There's a little bit of versatility there that this roster, I feel like, is going to need at some point. And if one side effect of Mountcastle's injury is that it creates 40-man space for you to go with that kind of player, it could be a good thing.
You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you may not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with discounts that are easy to come by. In fact, 99% of their auto customers earn at least one discount. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary. Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why drivers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
I'll go over now to this question, which comes from EJ, and I think that this is going to be an interesting one to pick apart, which is which player not in your top 50 has the highest likelihood of making it to MLB. So, Bob, there's a lot of ways we could go with this. We could go with our individual top 50s. We could go with the overall top 50 that we put out in February, or even, I'm sure you have a draft right now of your new top 50. So there's a lot of ways that we could take this one.
Yeah, there really is. I'm just going to go based off the official top 50 that we have from preseason for the exercise. But, yeah, you could go the cheater way where you're like Cameron Foster, who's nowhere near, even though we like him, he's nowhere near being on our top 50 just because he's, low leverage, 1-inning reliever, and he's on the 40-man. He's in AAA. Yeah, he's struggling a little bit to start, but he will get to the majors this year. I'm going to just avoid those types. I think the two guys for me that I'm looking at, Silas Ardway, who is AAA catcher, great defense, can work in a bat. I think you could easily see him make the majors in a Maverick Hanley type of situation from last year. Or Griffo Farrell, who is an honorable mention on our preseason. He can't really impact the ball where he'll be a regular player, but his defense and baseball IQ is so high and good enough that I could see a world where he's a Mason McCoy type where, yeah, he's just smart enough to be that 26th man on the roster for a decent team just to do the little things, fill in where needed, late game defensive replacement, what have you. So I'd say Griffo Farrell and Silas Ardway would be my top two picks.
Yeah, Ardway was the first guy that I thought of when I saw this question, because even if the bat is never good enough for him to stick on a major league roster as a backup over the course of a full season, his defense is so good that he's going to continue to have a job as long as he can catch. And those kind of players, generally speaking, defensive-minded catchers that can do just enough at the plate in AAA, they tend to get big league time. So Ardway, I think, is going to see major league action at some point. Whether that comes in Baltimore and how soon it comes remains to be seen, but that's definitely a guy to put on my list. I would agree, too, with Griffo Farrell. I think that that's a good pick, given his versatility, what he can offer you up the field. And then some relievers I'll rattle off here. Cameron Foster's the obvious one because he is on the 40-man roster now. But then a couple of others that I would put in there. Micah Assman, not in our top 50. He seems like a guy that could see major league time, and if not later this year, then certainly I think in 2027 he could be in that mix. So that's one that I would look at too. And then handful of other guys. We talked about Evan Yates a little bit in our last episode. He's got good numbers at AA right now. Maybe by the end of the season, he's one of those guys that's in the conversation of, okay, maybe he's not in the top 50, but every month when we're updating our list, when we're getting down those last few spots, he's one of the names we're thinking about. And sometimes those guys can break through. So that's someone that I would keep my eye on.
And maybe Ramon Gomez, if we ever have proof that he actually exists, a guy who can throw up to 104, 105, always a chance to make it. Tanner Smith, what was it? Tanner Foster? Tanner Smith, one of the relievers from the Padres trade last year that was really impressive in the AFL. Unfortunately, he's a little banged up right now too, but I think he's a guy that is in a similar boat to those other reliever types. Even Alex Pham, you could throw him in there. I think he's outside of our top 50, but close.
Yeah, I think I had Smith in my personal top 50 coming into the season. And then I think Pham just made it on. So I'll put one more name out there, and unfortunately he's hurt right now, and he barely made our top 50. My guess is that he's not going to make our May update. What about Peyton Neals?
Yeah, that's a good call too. Yeah, he did make our preseason list, but currently in my very, very rough draft before the show went live tonight, I said basically just rip up the preseason list and start from scratch because it's so up in the air. Yeah, he's just outside of my top 50 at this current moment in time. That could change, but he's going to be right on the door, and another guy like a Weston Wilson who could come up in a pinch and play in the majors.
Yeah, versatility and speed are never bad things to have when you're that kind of player. And with that, now we'll head into our last question, last call, brought to you by Checker Spot Brewing, located 1421 Ridgely Street, Checker Spot is open 7 days a week and is not far from Camden Yards, making it the perfect place for a pre- or post-game drink if you're heading out to the yard this season. And if you don't have tickets to the game or the Orioles are out of town, Checker Spot is actually a great place to go and sit and watch the game. Plenty of TV, some good food there to go along with their delicious beers. And that's Checker Spot Brewing, open 7 days a week at 1421 Ridgely Street in South Baltimore. And tonight, the honors for the last call question go to Sterling, who's given us a lot to think about here with this question. And Bob, do you want to give a little bit of background on this before reading off the question?
Yeah, and more reason to sign up for our Patreon, give it a shot on the 26% off for the 2026 season is because you get access to our Discord and the patron exclusive channels. A really interesting discussion popped off in there this morning about rank your top pitching prospects, because we got a lot of really good ones and they're pretty close as far as what do you consider ceiling, floor, anywhere in between. And there was just a question of how would you rank your list, and Vivek, another one of our patrons, responded with his list, which was Nestor Herman, Luis De Leon, Trey Gibson, Joseph Giroux, Levi Wells, Esteban Mejia, JT Quinn, Anthony Nunez, Jerron Watts-Brown, Blake Money, and Sterling responded to him with, what are the odds that one of these guys turns out to be the top prospect in the system? And I thought that was a really good question because, like we talked about, it's really up in the air. These are all excellent starting pitching prospects, and I think the odds aren't zero. So what do you think, Zach?
So I'll go through and just kind of give my thoughts on the guys individually, because I think this is a really good question, and I think that all of these pitchers have their own strengths as prospects, with some guys that I feel pretty comfortable in saying aren't going to get that number one status. Anthony Nunez, pure reliever, actually not going to be on the list a whole lot longer. Jerron Watts-Brown, I like the stuff, but I think that there's a lot of question marks there, so I think putting him as a possible future number one would be aggressive. Same with Blake Money, and then with the rest of this group, it gets interesting because I think if you had to go with who has the highest odds, Gibson is a natural pick because he finished third on our list preseason, which now that Dylan Beavers and Samuel Basayo graduated, kind of would make him the number one by default if we weren't going to update the list at all. He's also a consensus top 100 prospect. At least most outlets have him in their top 100, but there's an argument that Luis De Leon, with his stuff from the left side, has a higher ceiling than anybody in this group. And with De Leon being at AA, I think that deserves some consideration over Esteban Mejia, who has excellent stuff but is a few years younger, down in low A now. Nestor Herman, I think, is just really solid across the board. There's not that one pitch that jumps out for me like there is with De Leon's changeup or Mejia's fastball, but he's very solid across the board, and I can see why Vivek would have him as his top pitching prospect. Levi Wells, if you're in the camp that Wells is a reliever long-term, he's absolutely not going to be the number one prospect on the list, and I think as a starter, he's more of a five-and-dive guy, but there's some value there, and with a fastball that good, I don't want to just put him completely on the back burner. And then Giroux and Quinn, I think we still need to learn a little bit more about what we have there. So labeling them as a future number one prospect right now feels aggressive, but Giroux especially might get there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that top seven of that list that you just rattled off, I think they will or will at some point this season have an argument to be that number one overall prospect. Maybe it's going to be tough with the draft, though, with the number 7 overall pick thrown into the mix as well. But these pitchers, they each have a case, especially I think if it's Quinn or Giroux, it's going to be like towards the end of the season after we can really see what they did, their first full campaign. It's going to be tough to throw them at number one before they get close to a full season. And Esteban Mejia, pure ceiling, nobody's higher than him. Like you said, Trey Gibson's, I guess, technically the number one prospect right now. We'll see if he can hold that spot in a couple weeks. Nestor Herman's right there with him. Luis De Leon, you talked about it. Levi Wells, I think, is making a case to be the first of these pitching prospects to make the majors if they need someone. He's pitching really well to start the year, and he was holding 96 miles per hour into the sixth inning in his last start. So maybe he's going to try to, if he can, erase those reliever worries, that reliever risk, which, what's the risk? He's going to be a high-leverage Anthony Nunez type reliever. But if he can erase that, he might have a case. He might have a case.
And I'll put this out there, just one last thought about this question. Is there a position player right now that you think is making a strong case for number one? Knowing that Beavers and Basayo are no longer eligible, is there a position player realistically that could take that number one spot when we update this in May?
I'm going to try to not do full spoilers, but I have, again, very rough draft. I will cement this in at the very end of the month, the last second. But currently right now, 4 position players are my top 4. And again, my top 10 is so close you could literally just scramble it and I'd be like, yeah, looks pretty good. No matter which way it came out, I have 4 position players in my top 4 spots. I will list them in alphabetical order just to try not to, by last name, to try not to spoil who I currently have there, like it's that big of a deal. Wahiwa Aloy is one of them. Aaron Estrada is one of them. Nate George is one of them. And Ike Irish is one of them. And then Enrique Bradfield Jr. would be the 5th, but he's a little bit lower currently on this list. The rest is mostly just pitchers. So, yeah, I think one of those 4, definitely all those 4, have a case to be the number 1 prospect as well.
Yeah, my list is not final yet, but I can tell you that at least 2 of the names you rattled off are in consideration for my number 1 spot.
It's going to be fun. I think I have the funnest job putting together our personal lists and then combining them and being like, oh, look, I can't believe how it turned out. I get that spoiler. I get the sneak peek before everyone else does. It's a lot of fun. Looking forward to it.
Yep, and as a reminder, if you are part of our Patreon community, you're going to get that update here in a couple of weeks. Right about around the beginning of May, we'll update our top 50, and all season long into the off season, you will get monthly updates to the top 50 if you are a member of our Patreon community. Head over to patreon.com and check that out. Now you can get the discount too at the monthly or yearly rates. And with that, that does it for this week's show. All 3 of us will be back on the air next week to break down the latest news in Birdland. In the meantime, you can check out our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, and Blue Sky. We're also at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon.com and sign up to become a member today at the $3, $5, or $10 levels. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.